1, ready.
Good evening, everyone. Today being International Women's Day, the coincidence was not lost on me, and I have found it easy to borrow this coincidence to touch on the issue of women empowerment in Rwanda and the last few years' strides that have been made in this area of women's empowerment. The efforts of the last decade or so in women's empowerment, gender equality work that have earned Rwanda a name and position in the world as the #1 country in the world in gender equality, particularly as this refers to the top positions in parliament. It has also led to far-reaching transformative change in terms of society, as it has indeed shown a different landscape of what equality and gender parity can do. Today, Rwanda is known as the best place for a woman to be a politician, and also one of the best countries for a girl to be. This did not happen organically. This happened by intention. And the watershed moment in this gender equality process happened in 2003, especially when the constitution was redrawn and the quota of 30% was embedded in the constitution, ensuring that women would be represented at least at that level, with that percentage in parliament. The constitution revision also adhered to international norms and standards of gender equality, particularly the CEDAW, as well as the Respecting the Beijing Platform and the Africa Charter for Human and People's Rights. Back in 2003, I was working in Eritrea. That's in the Horn of Africa. A colleague of mine from Sweden, from across the corridor, one day sent me an email with an intriguing subject line. The subject line was, Rwanda beats Sweden. So I was wondering whether Rwanda and Sweden had played some sort of game or a sport. I knew it couldn't be football, because I would have heard about it. But I also wondered whether it might be maybe cross-country skiing. I thought no. So I opened the email with much curiosity and was surprised, pleasantly surprised, to read that Rwanda had surpassed Sweden, which had occupied the #1 position in the world in the legislators in parliament, which stood at 45%, and that year, that watershed year, 2003, Rwanda had achieved 2.5 points ahead at 47.5%. Today, in recent years, in fact, when researchers or discussions and forums talk about gender equality, they often cite 3 countries that are considered to be the paragons of that movement of women empowerment. They talk about Canada, they talk about Finland, and they talk about Sweden. Very few people know that Rwanda has achieved tremendous work in women empowerment. But let's fast forward from 2003 to today, a decade later. We're celebrating International Women's Day across the globe. But in 2003, when we had 47.5%, we have moved along the way to now 56.3% in parliament. This is not just in parliament. You would wonder, why in parliament, and why is this attaining great attention among some quarters who are keeping these statistics? Well, the parliament is that body, the legislative arm of the government, where all laws are created, where all bills originate. It is believed, and we have seen in Rwanda, and we have witnessed it, that when you have a majority of women in parliament, they tend to pass laws that are favorable to women. When laws are favorable to women, they're not necessarily unfavorable to men, but they're very favorable and gender sensitive and favorable to the family, and favorable laws for the family necessarily means favorable laws for the community and for the society. So that's the achievement of women in parliament, that we have been able, through the work of the women legislators in Rwanda, they have been able to enact new laws that are favorable to the families, to the communities, but also have been able to repeal the laws that previously disadvantaged women. And I will just pick out two. One was the family inheritance and property law, which previously did not enable women to inherit land or property from men, or that is from their husbands or from their fathers. They also were instrumental in passing the law on gender-based violence. It has not stopped in the parliament only. The figures speak for themselves. Besides the 56.5%, we also have in the Senate 38-something%. In some areas we have above parity, in other areas we have parity, and some are lagging behind, but still all of them above, in key critical areas, all of them above 30%. 30% was the threshold that would create that transformative change. Now, it's not that we are trying to race to get to 60% in women representation in parliament. It's not that we're trying to outstrip men, that would go against the grain, because men are have bought into this also. They're part of this process. It's not that we're trying to pass Sweden, Canada, Finland, or any other country. It's just that this change, this critical mass, it was believed that the 30% provision of positions for women in parliament would create that critical mass, that tilt, that irreversible tipping point that would lead to the change that we have seen today. And this has called for everyone to be part of the process, both men and women. The political will has been tremendous from men at all levels of society, at all levels of leadership. And besides, this political will is demonstrated by the fact that there have been other institutional mechanisms that were put in place. For example, we have a dedicated gender and family promotion ministry, and other gender offices as well, a gender monitoring office to ensure that all levels of government have gender sensitive policies, and also gender-based budgeting in all public office. What has been the chief driver of this is that women themselves have demonstrated to be capable and effective leaders. It has, of course, not stopped in parliament. This critical mass that I was talking about that was created has led to a sea change in the landscape of women empowerment in Rwanda. This means that while women or young girls can look to traditional roles, they can also break through the traditional roles and aspire to do any other, or take any other roles that they find they can dream about. Women traditionally hold a very special role as in decision-making process of the family, but for some time we have seen globally women taking on the roles of nurturers or mothers, but women in Rwanda can now hold these traditional roles of mothers, of nurses, of teachers, but also beyond nurturers, they can also be breadwinners. Women can be school teachers, but they can also be school principals, university lecturers, they can be university rectors, they can be nurses, but they can also aspire to be doctors and surgeons. They can be secretaries, but they can also be company secretaries, executive secretaries, and secretary generals. They see all of these among the women in Rwanda as well. They can achieve any profession that they would like to aspire to. There's no element to what they can achieve, and they feel that there is no impediment because it's embedded in the law. They can take the professions. They can be lawyers, they can be mayors, they can be ministers, they can be anything, and they can be engineers and architects, but they can also be architects and crafters of their own careers and engineers of their fortunes. They can look to examples far and wide for inspiration. They can look to Polish pioneer physicist and chemist Marie Curie for inspiration to be researchers and scientists. They can go to America and look for pioneer pilot who flew across the Atlantic Ocean, Amelia Earhart, to be not only flight attendants, but also pilots, avionics technicians, astronauts, cosmonauts. Yes, maybe one day. But they don't have to go that far. They can also look to role models at home. Women in Rwanda are treading new ground. They are shattering glass ceilings. They are trailblazing. We talked about the parliament. Yes, you can be a parliamentarian. That's wonderful. They're 56.5% of them. But you can also be a speaker of parliament. The role models are there. You can be moved from the chief operations officer of a parastatal organization, because I want to show you that this is not only in the government, but it's moving across the board in all spheres and walks of life in the parastatal organization. Like Ms. Claire Kamanzi, a young leadership, moved from the chief operations officer of the Rwanda Development Board to chief executive officer. She was named last year as one of the global young leaders. You can also be, she is a former TEDx speaker. Ms. Rose Mukankomeje is the head of the Rwanda Environmental Management Authority. She is still and was in 2011 when Rwanda received the 2 awards in environment, one the Global Energy Award and Future Policy Award. But in public office, also in the business sector, you have the women empowerment has also opened new doors and access to microcredits and financing, leading to a whole sea of women being able to own businesses as well. It's believed that about 30% of women, nearly 30% of the micro businesses are owned by women now. So they take inspiration from the Woman of the Year, the Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, Ms. Zulfat as well. They can take inspiration from the legendary work that was done by community judges of the Gacaca courts, whose work leaves an indelible legacy in our justice system. They can look to the police force, and this is critical because police force has usually been a role for men. But in recent years, not only in the firearm ranks, but also in the officer positions, the women have been increasing tremendously and exponentially. So this is a group of young women who were deployed to the floor in 2010 to be part of the UNAMID police force to specifically take care of gender-based training. 92 all women police force deployed from Rwanda to Darfur. Rwanda is the #6 troop and police contributing country in the world, and we have police and troops deployed in many countries, including as far from countries as Haiti. And in order to do this, it's not just a sweep of the pen, it's not just legislation, but there has to be, and there has been, sweeping educational reforms and programs and initiatives. We believe that this is the crux of the matter. This is where you change the minds, this is where you transform a society through legislation, but also through positive change, particularly in the area of education. Rwanda now has free, universal, and compulsory education for young people for the first 12 years. There has been, as a result of this, soaring enrollment for both young men and women, and especially for young women in non-traditional disciplines. Young women can be found in labs, as you can see. They can be found in ICT companies, in workshops. They can be found in technical and vocational training institutions as well, doing the non-traditional work that they were not known to do before. They are in sports. in competitive sports, in leisure sports, and even in the Paralympics. So, what is required is not only, Rwanda is a small country, but I think that the example that has been demonstrated by Rwanda can also be a case study for other countries. Globally, what we need to do is a massive and systemic re-education and re-socialization of our young men and women. Because young men have been socialized to feel strong, invincible, superior, and while at the same time, young girls are made to feel sometimes the opposite. Weak, vulnerable, needing for protection. We have to demystify the societal roles, the gender roles, to make sure that our young men grow up knowing that, yes, you can be strong, but you don't have to demonstrate violence to show your strength. There is nothing sissy about crying and being vulnerable. We all can be at one point or other, and girls can be strong too. I cannot talk about women empowerment or gender equality in Rwanda without honoring one individual. There have been many individuals, but particularly an individual who's been extremely instrumental in the work toward gender equality and gender empowerment in the country. Aloysia Inyumba passed away at a tender age last year in December, a tender age of 48. She had been twice the Minister of Gender and Family Promotion, and also had been a senator for 8 years. Her work remains a strong legacy for women empowerment, but also she has been a role model to me, a role model to many, many other women in Rwanda, as well as elsewhere. Her legacy remains strong, and we always fondly remember her and the work that she has done toward bringing the women of Rwanda to where they are today. We have to do it together. I'm not one who subscribes to the belief that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. No, we are all from this planet Earth, and we need to change the world together, working hand in hand. So if there are any Martians who are remaining in this audience, I hope they are a minority. So I'm extending my hand out to you to bring you down from Mars, back here on terra firma, on planet Earth, so that together we can change the world, one country at a time. I leave you with the very deep words that are enshrined in the motto of UNESCO. It's an anonymous writer. It says, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, it's in the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed." Well, for wars, we can, if we replace the word wars with prejudices and the word peace with equality, it might read differently and might be applicable to this particular topic. So, since prejudices begin in the minds of men, and here I'm talking about men in its generic form as in people, it's in the minds of men that equality must be constructed. Ladies and gentlemen, together, working collaboratively, we can do it. Thank you very much. Happy International Women's Day.
3, 2, 1.